Hey everyone, welcome to Started Up, a podcast brought to you by Accelerate Me. My name is Hussein Janmohamed.
And my name is Lawati, and we're your hosts for the podcast. If you don't already know about us, Accelerate Me is a leading student startup accelerator in the UK. And now, on top of that, we're launching this podcast, Start It Up, the hub for everything you need to know about entrepreneurship.
We're very excited to be hosting our guest for today, who we're sure will amaze you with the vast experience and knowledge that he has, in the same way that he's amazed us.
So today, our special guest is Jamie Gotz. Jamie has worked in a variety of different industries and professions throughout his working life. He most recently went through Antler, a VC accelerator, and established his own tech startup, Shepherd, that he is currently working on remotely with his co-founder. So everybody, here is Jamie. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very thrilled to have you on our podcast. So Jamie, could you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your unconventional work background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lamis and Hussein, for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I've got a really unconventional background. There are very few people who I've met who have a similar path to myself. So you can probably hear from my funny accent, I've grown up in South Africa. I haven't actually worked here before. I've grown up and studied here. I've got 2 business degrees from the University of Stellenbosch. I then decided to move over to London. Fortunately, I've got a German passport, so I decided to just hop on a plane and see what happens. So in terms of, when I got there, I had landed a job for a leather manufacturing company, and I was a sales manager there. I had never managed anybody in my life. I got off a plane, went straight to the office, and was just told to go and speak to clients and sell leather. That was definitely not in line with my tertiary education. But it got me to London, and I'm super grateful for going down that route. I then realized, look, I want to get back into what I had studied, which was sort of finance and business. So I moved into a FinTech growth stage company, which is a spin out of a much larger group called VAT IT. The spin out is called WTax. And there I was basically, again, thrown in the deep end, and basically launched the European office with my managing director and one other person. And we started in the UK. We were essentially looking to recover withholding tax for large funds and high net worth individuals. That was a fantastic experience, learned a lot. I then realized I'm fascinated by the venture capital space and the startup space. So I figured, look, how can I best get there? I decided to study through the CFA Society. I got my investment management qualification, and that was a tough experience. Trying to work while you're actually studying. You wake up early bowls to do a few hours of work, then you're studying over lunch, sometimes during work, and then late into the evening. So, for me, I worked really hard, and I ended up getting into a boutique investment bank, an M&A advisory firm. And that was essentially my stepping stone to get into venture capital. I thought that was the best route to go. I was deeply disappointed. It definitely, the industry never sang to me. It just wasn't my cup of tea. So I ended up actually quitting without anything lined up, and decided to just take a plunge directly into the startup scene. I was working as a freelancer and just contracting with a couple of startups. And I then also decided to make a few micro ticket investments through an investment syndicate that I founded called the Network Effect. To date, I've made 4 small ticket investments, one of which has exited, which was really nice. And then I actually joined a company called Alia, which is a not-for-profit commercial real estate business. But I was actually heading up the startup incubator side. So we were working with a lot of social impact startups, trying to actually make a difference with the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Absolutely loved my time there. And then at the end of 2019, I was meant to then take a role for a Series A cloud kitchen company. And we had spent a couple of months, negotiating the contract and a start date and that sort of thing. I also had a 3-month notice period. So eventually when it got down to actually signing the contract, I had this sudden realization that the role that I was going in for, which was a head of operations role, wasn't really what I was passionate about and what wasn't really what I wanted to do. I'm a front office type of person. I'm very strategic. I like going out and making things happen. So last minute, I actually decided not to take the role, and decided I wanted to do something on my own. Just whatever it was, it had to be mine. If I shared it with 1 or 2 or 3 other people, absolutely fine. But I wanted something earlier than Series A, which sounds crazy because Series A in normal world is super early anyway. And then what ended up happening was 3 weeks later, I was scrolling on LinkedIn as I do, and I saw an article announcing that this cloud kitchen company had raised about 250 odd million pounds. So they had closed an enormous round of funding. It was part equity, part joint venture partnership with a private equity firm. But nonetheless, I had no regrets, and I said, look, I'm here. I quit or I didn't take the role for a reason. Let me just do my thing. And that's when I applied for Antler. So I've never looked back. I'm so happy. It's a huge risk to take, and my fiance works in startups as well. So I feel like we both may have a screw loose here or there, but we both love it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's really good though. It's crazy though that you've already worked in so many industries. So I guess one thing I'm very curious to ask about was when you were sort of planning for university and figuring out what exactly it was you wanted to study and maybe what your plans were after university. Did you have any specific idea in your head of what you wanted to do? And did you always have an interest in so many industries? Because I feel like a very common predicament that many people are in is that they aren't exactly sure what to do after university. So then what is your experience with that?
Yeah, so if I'm being perfectly honest, I actually had no clue. Leaving school, we weren't taught how to plan ahead. We weren't taught, okay, these are the subjects you need to take at high school in order to get get into the degree that you want to in university, in order to get the job that you want post-university. I was only thinking, probably the next week ahead. I really wasn't thinking much further than that. I did have a natural knack for business, so I went to the University of Stellenbosch, and I knew I would do business. It was what I was good at, what I was comfortable with. That said, I actually studied economics and logistics in my final year at university. I haven't practiced logistics management at all, not a day in my entire life, apart from maybe driving to the shop and back. That's as far as I go, So I wish I had planned more and really sat down and thought, this is what I should be studying because this is what I want to do. So what ended up happening in my experience, I had to learn through my career what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do. And in hindsight, I wish I had, number one, thought about my career path before university and at university. And number two, I wish I had also done a few internships to get a feel for different industries, to realize, okay, don't want to do that. I quite like this. Let me see how that goes. I wish I was more calculated in my path, but I've definitely made the most of the opportunities that have been handed to me. So yeah.
Do you think you would have done anything differently though? Because I feel in many ways maybe your experience has contributed to you being able to do what you currently do right now. If you could go back, would you change your career progression in any way?
So if we go one step before my career progression, I would definitely have taken more internships at university. I think at high school, you don't get to actually see too much at high school. But then one thing I really, really regret is not actually starting my own business at university. I think I gave it a half-hearted attempt where I imported some sandals or flip-flops, which is what we call them in South Africa, and I maybe ordered 30 or 40 pairs or 50 pairs, and I sold them to my mates. But I ended up actually just giving them as like gifts for people's birthdays and things. So that was my first attempt at a business. So I really wish I had just given business a go, at university, where I had accommodation paid for, I had meals paid for, and my tuition paid for. So it was a risk-free environment to actually start a business. In terms of post-university, I don't have any regrets, to be honest. It was tough. For example, going into studying through the CFA, which was grueling for about a year, then moving into investment banking, realizing super early on that this isn't for me, and then quitting. I was like, ooh. Am I a quitter, or have I just wasted my entire studies and all those blood, sweat, and tears? But it got me to where I am today, and I'm super grateful for that. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. And I do have a question regarding your experience at the European FinTech company. So what stimulated you to getting into VC and investment banking after working at the European FinTech company, sorry. And was there like a certain motivation or drive that you were aiming to achieve at that point?
Yeah, so I felt like, I did a lot at that European FinTech company. We started out as a tiny team in the UK, and, I was flying to, or either flying or getting on a train to Edinburgh every couple of weeks. I was then flying over to Dublin to meet with asset managers and pension funds. And then we ended up, expanding pretty much all across Europe and signing some really, really big deals, like Investec Asset Management and a bunch of those companies. And then we ended up expanding the team. We probably had about maybe 15 or so people in the London office before I left. I felt that my learning capabilities had sort of plateaued a little bit, and that didn't really sit well with me. So while I could have had a really comfortable career at the FinTech company and probably worked my way up right to sort of managing director or whatever the case is, I felt like I wasn't really learning anything else. So that was the thing for me, which is why I wanted to move and get into a different space. I had always been interested in startups and early stage anything. And that's where I learned about venture capital. This is pretty cool. You sit behind a desk and you say yes or no to these different companies and hand out cash. So that's what I thought it was at the time, but it's a whole lot more than that. And the reason I went into banking was essentially to get into venture capital. So yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting, probably unconventional path, but it got me here. So it's I'm not sure I would recommend it to too many people, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, but it's crazy how you realize what you were very, very, very passionate about after all these work experiences. So yeah, your journey does sound very interesting.
So now let's talk a bit about Antler and Shepherd. So I think first to start off with, could you give us sort of like a pitch, I guess, of Shepherd? So what exactly is Shepherd? Just give us a quick pitch, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So myself and my co-founder have experienced a lot of inefficiencies and waste when it comes to meetings. And we thought, okay, look, every company has meetings every single day across the world, no matter what language you speak, no matter what industry you're in, you have to meet and talk about certain topics. And we know that there's a lot of waste in terms of meetings from start to finish. So for us, we said, right, this is definitely a big problem. Can we solve this? So what Shepherd is doing is actually just solving for the inefficiencies across the entire meeting timeline. So before, when you set an agenda, you invite attendees, you allocate time to different meeting agenda items, through to during the meeting where you take meeting notes and that sort of thing, and then afterwards with action items and storing the meeting, etc. So what Shepherd is essentially trying to do is make it super, super seamless for companies to set a really structured meeting, run the meeting from one single dashboard, incorporating all sorts of different tech. So things like video conferencing technology, where you often have to, you'll have your Google Hangouts tab at the top right, and if you need to see anything else, you have to toggle. You have to go to a different tab or to open up a different document. So Shepherd is essentially a web app dashboard that allows teams to run meetings from start to finish. And it stores your meetings. It allows you to search back on previous meetings. It allows you to set meetings if you want to. And alternatively, you can actually go directly into your calendar. So your Google Calendar or your Microsoft Outlook calendar, because those are the two most sort of widely used. And that's where you typically set meetings. So from there, you can actually set each agenda item with time allocation, set a purpose to each attendee, set any pre-meeting tasks to encourage people to prep for the meeting, and just trying to make meetings super easy to manage and navigate, I guess.
Okay, so what eventually led you to enter the startup scene? And was it like always part of your plan to start your own business, or did it all happen unexpectedly? Did you always dream of creating a company like Shepherd, or did your experiences eventually lead you to that?
So definitely my experiences. I think I've always been fascinated by business and starting my own thing. I think that's one of the bravest things you can do, is start a business. You can go jump off a bridge attached to a rope by your feet, and bungee jump and jump out of a plane. Those are great, but I think that they're pretty risk-free, or fairly risk-free. Starting a business, it's not easy. I think on top of things like, okay, what if it fails and I lose money? There's also, what if it fails and people think I'm a failure, or my parents think I'm a failure, or worse, I think I'm a failure. So for me, I always had this thing at the back of my head saying, that is one, if you can do that, you are unbelievably brave, whether you succeed or fail. So eventually I just said, look, it's time. I don't have kids. I'm experienced, I'm smart, I'm resourceful. Let's just give it a go. So I felt like definitely my experience played a big part in that, but also just my curiosity as to, can I actually do this, or was I not really cut out for this, is what really drove me to try and give it a go.
And of course, like as you said, it was a huge, not only starting a business, a huge risk, it was also a huge risk for you, because you're being given a senior role in an organization and you rejected that, moved to a different country, and decided to start up your own business, which is crazy. So what gave you the confidence to be able to do that? I think lots of people who have ideas lack the confidence to actually pursue those ideas. What gave you the confidence?
Wow. I think, number one, my gut. I felt like there was just something that didn't sit right with me when I was about to sign and take this new role. But of course, I consulted with my fiance, and she was like, look, she backs me a huge amount and she'll support me no matter what. And she just said, if you don't feel like it's right, don't do it. It's as simple as that. The right thing will come, or just start something. I can support us. It's absolutely fine. And then I had an element of, I need my family to also be okay with what I'm doing. So I consulted with my sister, my mom and dad, my brother-in-law, and I just said, this is what I'm thinking. It's super risky. And to be honest, this whole startup, venture capital, all of that goes straight over their head. They don't understand it at all. But to them, what's fantastic is they don't need to understand it. As if they see me, with a lot of conviction and setting my mind to something, they'll back me no matter what. So they gave me the green light, and I just think that the people around me gave me a lot of confidence to just do my thing and give it a go. And look, there's a good chance that it fails. Of course, we're operating in a space where 95% of companies that try and do what I'm doing fail. So, it's now or never. So I'm really excited to just give it a go.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that you had a strong support network to be able to do that.
Okay, so
Yeah,
after
absolutely.
you realized that this is what you wanted to pursue, what made you pick Antler amongst all the other startup incubators in the area, or all around the world?
So I think it was last year or 2 years ago. I'm not quite sure. I got into Antler in London, and I turned that down initially, and I said, look, thank you very much, but I've received another offer that was slightly more safe, slightly more cushy. So I'm assuming at that stage I wasn't ready to take that leap. I was speaking to a lot of other companies, or a lot of founders that were looking for co-founders before I came across Antler again, and spoke to them. There was one electric e-bike startup. There were a couple that were really interesting, but there wasn't a risk. There wasn't an option for me that was as risk free as Antler. I mean, it's not risk free, but it's definitely de-risked. I was speaking to a bunch of other London-based venture builders and startup factories, and they were also looking for co-founders or looking for people to come in and just launch a company from scratch. There were a couple that I was very interested in. However, I felt like the vast majority were only offering capital to really launch, and they weren't willing to actually be very, very hands-on. I did a lot of research on Antler. I spoke to a lot of people who had gone through the program, and they were all very positive about it. So I figured, let's give it a go. And the cohort that I went to was actually based in Oslo. It wasn't in London. So my fiance and I actually just decided to pack up our apartment and get on a plane and fly to Oslo to join the startup program, not knowing a soul, not knowing anything. So it was an adventure in addition to trying to start a company.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so if anyone isn't aware of exactly like what the program looks like, what you would do with Antler, what exactly happened there?
Yeah, so Antler is, in my own words, I'm not sure how they would describe themselves, but they are the earliest stage of venture capital. So they'll run a cohort that is roughly about 10 to 12 weeks long. They'll bring on individuals onto the cohort from different backgrounds. So typically tech or business or a domain, if it's an industry vertical. And you come on as an individual with about 50 to 100 different other founders. And you do a lot of different industry sprints. You get given problem statements, and you have to build out business cases around these problem statements and then pitch them back. And so you spend probably about the first 4 or 5 weeks doing these sprints, and it's super intense. There's very little sleep. You work super hard, but you have so much fun doing it. And you face a lot of fears, things like public speaking or having to pick up the phone and ask for a survey, or that sort of thing. It's really exciting. And then after the 4 or 5 weeks, you then start pairing up with different people in the cohort. So for me, I found my co-founder Harry, and I approached him. He's a tech guy. He led a software team that built the first autonomous racing vehicle in the Nordics. He's a data scientist, full stack developer, very, very sharp guy. And I said, look, Harry, we need to track out now. I would like to work with you, and I hope you feel the same way. We don't have an idea. Let's just, pin our ears back, track out together, go to Antler and say, guys, we want to work together. We'll come up with the idea later. And they agreed. They said, go for it. You guys are a fantastic team. And then once you track out, you spend the remainder of the time, so probably about 5, maybe 6 weeks, and just building a business, coming up with an idea, solving a real big problem, getting a lot of traction, speaking to a lot of different industry players, validating around the product, and then at the end of the 10 weeks, you essentially go in and pitch it to an investment committee that's made up of a global investment team from Antler, venture capitalists, and angel investors. Which is, that's amazing. And then the next day you find out you either got the investment or you don't. And then if you don't, you sort of just fall away. And if you do get the investment, then you incorporate, you receive the investment, and you basically just start the company and start building as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you did start, so you were in the Antler program during COVID, right? Or was that before?
It was during COVID. It was during COVID. So Yeah.
So, what were the challenges you faced when you first established your startup, and how did COVID come to affect that?
Well, we were quite lucky. So firstly, I missed the first week of the program. I had to dial in and do it remotely. But to be honest, the Antler team facilitated beautifully for that. It didn't hinder my experience at all. We were able to actually get together. Oslo at that point wasn't under any sort of lockdown, so we could, be there in person, pitch in person, and get to know each other, and also go for beers and drinks and that sort of thing to get to know each other. Then after we pitched for investment, I think about a week later, the whole of Oslo went into lockdown. So we had to work from home. At that point, I actually got on a plane and flew back to South Africa. So, it actually hasn't affected us negatively at all. We've just rolled with the punches. We do see ourselves as a remote first company. So, this is what we were going to do anyway, work remotely. And we're busy hiring at the moment for two individuals, and we're going to be a remote first company. So COVID has actually, in essence, played into our hands, because also we're focusing on, first and foremost, is solving for remote meetings. So in fact, it's the timing could not be better with COVID.
Okay, that's good to hear, at least. So then, you mentioned like you mentioned speaking to people who are looking for founders, and then you also mentioned how you met your current co-founder. What advice would you give to someone who has an idea but doesn't have a co-founder yet? What do you think you should look for in a co-founder? How do you sort of establish that?
Yeah. So before I joined Antler, I was trying to start my own thing without any help from a company like Antler. And I was trying to find a co-founder. I had put a few job ads out and that sort of thing. And what I realized is it's unbelievably difficult to find a co-founder that is in the same place as you, that you get along with perfectly, that is geographically in the right place as well, is willing to quit their job if they have one to take a really big risk. And that also buys into the idea that you've come up with. So for me, I realized, going into Antler, if I had to pick one of the biggest value adds that they brought to the table, it was bringing 49 other people into the same building that I could then, court and get to know. But I think in terms of what you look for in a co-founder, I think a very complementary co-founder is extremely important. Above all, I think you need somebody who you get along with, somebody who you don't get tired of if you have to spend 12 or 16 hours of your day getting to know each other, or working, or being extremely stressed. You want to make sure that you enjoy being around one another. Then somebody who, I think if you can find somebody who can dovetail with you quite nicely. So, where you have maybe slight weaknesses, they're fairly strong, and vice versa. That's a big thing that Harry and I have going for us, is that we're super complementary and we dovetail really nicely. And we're just on the same page. I think if you can find somebody who is on the same page, is willing to take a similar risk to you, has the same ambitions as you, is really just in the same mindset, it's a game changer, and it's super important. So in fact, with Antler, before when I mentioned you have to track out, we spent about 4 hours filling out this form independently, laying out the expectations and the terms to co-found with you, which is things like, if you start a company and get investment, what are your salary expectations? How many hours are you hoping to work? Are you looking to exit the company? Or are you looking to just keep a long-term sustainable business going forward? So all of these things we made sure we were perfectly aligned on before actually saying, right, we are co-founders and we're going to run with this together, sort of thing. So definitely make sure you're on the same page. Okay,
so in relation to your own experience with Antler, what would you advise someone to wanting to start up their own business? Would you encourage them to join an accelerator or start up independently? So what are the pros and cons of both options in your opinion?
Sure. So, I'm a big advocate, having gone through the Antler program, of that sort of model. going into an environment where everything is startup, everything is hustling, everything is supporting one another, it's unbelievably impactful on your journey as a founder. So, for us, we had a small stipend for the first 10 week period, which, is a slightly de-risked way of, forfeiting a big, or a salary, whatever you were earning, to actually, have a bit of income that can pay the bills, pay your rent, and feed you, while also starting a business. They then also provide a huge network. If you need to speak to an investor, an angel, a VC, a large corporate, anyone, you make the request, and I'd say 7-8 times out of 10, you'll get that meeting or you'll get that phone call. So if you do that on your own, you're going to really battle to do that. So the actual environment and the support that a company like Antler, there are other sort of accelerators or incubators, however you'd like to call them, out there. But they really are fantastic. And if you were to do it without, going down that route, of course, you then stand the chance to own more equity in your own company. You stand the chance to build something that can then justify a higher valuation. But in my opinion, I think if you're looking for a de-risked way of starting a company, definitely find a model like an Antler or an Entrepreneur First, or one of those companies who, really give you the platform to succeed.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. And just to hear maybe the other side of the argument, do you think there's ever a benefit to, you spoke about the fact that you have a co-founder, so you're not a lone founder, and then also the fact that you went through the Antler program. So do you think there's ever, or there could be a benefit to, one, being a lone founder, and two, starting it up completely independently?
So I've spent a couple months trying to do it by myself, and it's incredibly lonely. I'm definitely capable of doing it, but it's just not enjoyable. So for me, in my opinion, if I had to do it over again, of course I've got a co-founder now, I would still have a co-founder. I think there's so many highs and so many lows that you want to share or that you need to share. That's enough of enough of a reason to have a co-founder. Not to mention, of course, they bring in expertise. They bring in another pair of hands to help you out. So it really makes a huge difference for me to have a co-founder. You basically have a mate who is, trying to tackle the same problem as you, going through similar risks. It makes the journey far more enjoyable. Of course, if you have a co-founder or two co-founders, you have to split the equity, according to either evenly or according to the value that you bring. But for me, I'm willing to give up half my company to experience this whole journey with somebody else and share it with somebody. And at the end of the day, if you have somebody with you, you're more likely to succeed, in my opinion, as long as the fit is right. So, it's better to have a small portion of something big than a big portion of something small or that fails. Yeah,
for sure. And it's really good to find people who are like-minded, people who you connect with on such a deeper level. I know that always feels very good when you know that you're on the same page with someone and you can relate to someone so well. So you've obviously worked in many different industries in the past. You've recently started this up, and you obviously have a lot going on right now. What are your plans for the future? Where do you see yourself going with the company and just in general?
So, at the moment, Shepherd is pretty early. We've just raised funding from Antler, led by Antler. We've also raised funding from the Norwegian government, from Innovation Norway. So right now we're at a point where we need to move quickly and build quickly. So we're really focused on that. We're hiring for a UX designer. We're hiring for a front-end developer, and we just need to build this product as quickly as possible. And we've got quite a few different pilot customers in the pipeline, one really, really amazing corporate. So we're super excited about that. And we're under the belief that we need to move really quickly. We can't scale to one one geography alone. We need to scale globally and do that from the outset. So that's what we're going to be doing. Hopefully launching in roughly April, May time next year, maybe June. So yeah, we're super excited for that. And then, hopefully going to expand the team out and just build a company that solves meetings. If the company exits, which would be fantastic, we would definitely try and solve for another big problem. We'll also be looking to raise our seed round probably Q2, Q3 2021. So we've already started discussions with a few investors, European investors, some angels, mostly VCs. So yeah, we're in a good place, and we're excited to grow very, very quickly.
That's so exciting even for me to hear. So I'm sure you and your co-founder must be so very excited for all of this. Now, just to come to a close, before we end, if you could give one piece of advice to our viewers and listeners, what would you tell them regarding entrepreneurship?
I would probably need to give two pieces of advice. So the first would be just take the plunge. Take the plunge and just do it. What's the worst that will happen is you'll need to find a new job, and most of the time you're qualified to be able to do that. So I think that would be my first piece of advice. The second would be to move quickly. For me, when I was tracking out with Harry during the Antler program, we each had one non-negotiable, and mine was speed. I think that there's no substitute for it. If you can move quickly, of course you'll make more mistakes doing that, but at least you're moving forward, and at least you have some sort of momentum. So I would definitely encourage people, take the plunge. If you have this niggling feeling at the back of your mind to start something, I promise you will regret it if you don't. So there's no better time than now, and if you do it very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Jamie, I would just like to thank you for joining this conversation with us today. So we're sure that our listeners are as inspired as we are with your journey of realizing your true passions and what was actually meant for you.
Yeah, and it honestly feels so good to just come from this conversation, hear about all of your experiences, hear about how confidently you were able to step into this new space, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
Thank you so much.
So thank you to our listeners for listening to this podcast, and make sure you stay tuned for more. And also check out our next podcast episode and follow us on all our socials. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast. If you have any suggestions, feel free to let us know.
And just before we end, Jamie, did you have anything to say?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And if any listeners do want to get in touch with us or learn more about Shepherd, you can do so at meetshepherd.com, and get in touch with me at jamie@meetshepherd.com, and I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Very exciting stuff. So we hope you guys enjoy that conversation as much as we did. And this is what you can expect from Start It Up. Incredible visionaries with their incredible stories. I hope you're as excited as we are for the next episode. So until then, if you have an idea that's been running through your head, go start it up. We'll see you next time.